Welcome to Productivity Unlocked, the podcast that helps you work smarter, not harder. I am your host, Shahid Sharif, and today I will be talking about something that might sound dry on the surface but is absolutely critical to project success: structured methodology and funding gates. Whether you are a seasoned project manager or just starting out, understanding how governance mechanisms work and why they matter can make all the difference between delivering on time and on budget or watching a project spiral into chaos. So today, I'm breaking down why methodology matters, how gating works, and why funding controls are often the unsung heroes of successful projects. Let's start with the basics. When I talk about project methodology, I am referring to structured framework that guides how you execute your project from start to finish. It is essentially your roadmap for navigating through all the complexity and uncertainty that comes with project work. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, methodology sounds like bureaucracy and unnecessary paperwork. I hear this all the time when consulting with organizations. But here's the thing: methodology isn't about creating barriers, it is about creating consistency and predictability in an inherently unpredictable environment. Let me share a quick example. I work with a global telecommunications company that implemented a standardized agile methodology across all their software development projects. The result: they reduced delivery timeframes by 30% and increased stakeholder satisfaction scores by 45%. And the key wasn't just using agile methods, it was using them consistently across all projects, allowing teams to becoming more efficient with each iteration. Methodology also serves another crucial purpose. It captures institutional knowledge and transforms individual expertise into organizational assets. Think about it. When that brilliant project manager with 20 years of experience retires, a robust methodology ensures their knowledge doesn't walk out the door with them. And let's not forget about risk reduction. Structured approaches help teams identify and mitigate risks early through frameworks for assessment at defined intervals. I remember working with a healthcare organization implementing a new patient management system. That methodology required a mandatory risk assessment phase that identified a major data migration risk early on. That early identification saved them an estimated $2 million in potential rework costs. Now, that's a return on investment for following a methodology. Let's talk about gating in project management. To understand gating, think about building a rocket. You wouldn't assemble the whole thing and then check if it worked, right? You test each component along the way. That's essentially what gating does for projects. Gating is a governance approach where projects must pass through formal checkpoints or gates before proceeding to the next phase. At each gate, the project team presents specific deliverables that demonstrate the project's health and readiness to proceed. Then a governance body, often a steering committee or senior management team, reviews these deliverables and makes one of several decisions. They might give a full go to continue as planned or a conditional go with specific adjustments required. They could tell the team to recycle and address deficiencies before returning to this gate. They might put the project on hold temporarily, or in some cases they might kill the project entirely. And that last option, killing a project, is actually incredibly valuable. Gating prevents what I call the runaway train phenomenon, where problematic projects continue consuming resources despite fundamental flaws. By creating intentional pause points, organizations ensure that investment decisions are made deliberately rather than by default. I have seen this work beautifully in practice. A manufacturing company that I consulted with implemented stage gate processes for new product development. Their product success rate increased from 65% to 82%, but more importantly, they identified non-viable products earlier, reducing wasted investment by approximately 40%. For gating to work properly, you need several interconnected elements. First, you need clearly defined deliverables at each gate that provide evidence of project health and readiness. These might include business cases, requirements documents, design specifications, test results, official documentation, financial projections, and having standardized templates for these deliverables ensures consistency and completeness. Requirements management is another critical element. Requirements form the foundation of project success, and a robust gating process ensures they are clearly defined, properly scoped, validated with stakeholders, and traceable throughout the project lifecycle. And any changes to requirements should trigger reassessment at appropriate gates to ensure the project remains viable and aligned with business objectives. RACI matrices are also essential. For those who aren't familiar, RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed. It specifies who must do the work, who has the decision authority, who provides input, and who receives updates. For each deliverable and gate, a well-defined RACI prevents confusion and ensures appropriate stakeholder involvement. Quality assurance is another element backed by good evidence and baked into good gating processes. Gates provide natural quality checkpoints for peer reviews, independent validation, compliance assessments, and performance testing. Now let's talk about what might be the most powerful element of a project governance: funding control. The way organizations allocate and release project funds fundamentally shapes project behavior and outcomes. When projects receive full funding upfront, those teams lose a powerful incentive to maintain discipline and stakeholder engagement. It is like giving a teenager their entire college fund on the first day of freshman year, not exactly a recipe for disciplined spending. Conversely, when funding is released incrementally at gates, teams remain motivated to demonstrate value and adhere to governance requirements. There's definitely a psychology to funding gates. When teams know that future funding depends on successfully completing current phase deliverables, they tend to prioritize quality over expedience, maintain stronger stakeholder engagement, be more transparent about challenges, and make more disciplined scope decisions. For those of you thinking about implementing funding gates, here are some practical principles to follow. First, release funds incrementally. Only provide enough funding to reach the next gate. Second, tie funding to deliverables so it is clear what must be completed to unlock the next funding tranche. Third, maintain reserve buffers. Hold contingency funds that require additional approval to access. And finally, document all funding decisions with clear records of approvals, conditions, and expectations. Let me share a real-world example. I worked with a financial services organization implementing a trading platform. They divided their $40 million budget into 5 funding tranches aligned with project phases. When the third phase revealed significant technical challenges, they were able to pause, reassess, and pivot their approach, having only committed $18 million rather than a full budget. That's the power of funding gates. You limit your exposure until you have proof that the project remains viable. Now let's talk about the flip side. What happens when proper governance and mechanisms are not in place? Without gates and funding controls, projects often fall victim to predictable patterns of failure. The first is what I call the shortcut cycle. It goes something like this. Pressure to meet deadlines leads to shortcuts. Shortcuts create technical debt and quality issues. Quality issues require additional work to fix. Additional work creates more schedule pressure, and more schedule pressure leads to even more shortcuts. It is a vicious cycle that I've seen derail countless projects. Then there's what I call the documentation deficit. When documentation requirements are not enforced through gates, critical information remains in team members' heads rather than in accessible formats. This creates huge risks: knowledge loss when team members leave, inconsistent understanding amongst stakeholders, difficulty onboarding new team members, and challenges with maintenance and support. And perhaps the most expensive risk is the sunk cost fallacy. Without regular gate reviews that include the option to terminate projects, organizations often continue to invest in failing projects simply because they have already invested so much. I witnessed a government agency that continued funding a citizen portal project for 3 years despite missing multiple deadlines and exceeding budgets. Without formal gates requiring viability assessment, the project continued until it had consumed 12 million, only to be abandoned when a new administration took office. That's 12 million that could have been redirected to more viable initiatives if proper governance had been in place. So, how can organizations implement effective funding gates? Based on experience across industries, here are some best practices. First, right-size governance for project scale. Not all projects require the same level of governance. Consider creating tiered approaches based on budget size, strategic importance, complexity, and risk profile. A large retailer I worked with uses a 3-tier governance model. Tier 1, over 5 million full stage gate process with executive steering committee approval. Tier 2, $1 to $5 million, streamlined gates with director level approval. Tier 3, under 1 million, lightweight checkpoints with manager approval. Second, balance documentation with value. Documentation should be sufficient but not excessive. Focus on documents that support critical decisions, mitigate significant risk, enable knowledge transfer, and will be actively used going forward. Third, create clear gate criteria. Each gate should have explicit criteria that determines whether a project passes. These criteria should be objective where possible, aligned with business value, known to the team in advance, and consistently applied. Fourth, ensure executive support. Governance processes require executive support to be effective. Without it, gates become rubber stamp exercises rather than meaningful control points. Executives must model the behavior they expect by attending gate reviews, asking tough questions, being willing to make difficult decisions about project continuation, and supporting governance processes even when they are inconvenient. And finally, automate where possible. Modern project portfolio management tools can automate aspects of governance like document workflows and approvals, gate notification and scheduling, requirement traceability, and financial tracking and projections. This automation reduces administrative burden while increasing compliance. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to emphasize that in the quest for project success, structured methodology and robust governance aren't bureaucratic obstacles. They are essential enablers. By enabling thoughtful funding, gates, and governance mechanisms, organizations create the conditions for our project teams to deliver consistent, high-quality results. The most successful organizations view governance not as a compliance exercise, but as a competitive advantage. They recognize that the discipline to follow processes, create required deliverables, and pass through meaningful gates ultimately leads to faster delivery of higher quality outcomes. As you evaluate your organization's approach to project governance, consider not just whether you have processes in place, but whether those processes, particularly around funding controls, are actually driving the behaviors and outcomes you need for sustained project success. Share your thoughts and comments or tag us on social media with hashtag Productivity Unlocked. That's all for today's episode of Productivity Unlocked. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us a lot where more people can find us. I am Shahid Sharif, and until next time, keep unlocking your productivity potential.